Wonderful. Hi, everyone. This is Regina with Food Recovery Network, continuing the conversation all this week for Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. I am joined by many incredible voices throughout this week, and I am so excited to introduce our next speaker in just a second. But before I do that, I just wanted to remind everyone that, for the next several days, Food Recovery Network is putting out content all around this week associated with Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. And we want to do that in an effort to help everyone come together in a space so that we can pour into that space our collective understanding around hunger, food insecurity, and around homelessness, being unhoused, and that raising our collective awareness as the week asks us to do. But then I'm joined by incredible voices to help continue to ease us from awareness and think about the things that we can do as individuals to move from awareness into action. And I know that so many of our student leaders all across the United States are already actively engaged in so many efforts to end hunger. You're working with your partner agencies as they support our community members who are experiencing homelessness, who are currently unhoused, or who are not right now connected to safe and stable housing. I know that we are already doing so much, but again, we wanted to create this space in support of Homelessness and Hunger Awareness Week, again, so that we can be in community and understand and learn from one another. It is with my great honor and pleasure to introduce to everyone Reverend Carolyn Foster. In just a second, Reverend is going to speak more about herself, but I wanted to just say that I came to know Reverend Carolyn Foster through the work and partnership of Food Recovery Network and the Poor People's Campaign. And through Shally Barnes, many of you know Shally. Shally has sat on many of our conversations and has lent her voice. And from Shally, in this wonderful partnership with Poor People's Campaign, I got to know Reverend. And I'm so honored, truly honored to have this conversation for all of you to get to know Reverend and the work that Reverend is doing in her community, so that, again, we can feel inspired, we can learn together, and we can have more resources so that when we feel so called, we can move further into action and help get other people to be part of this as well. So, Reverend Carolyn Foster, hello, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you today, Regina.
Oh, excellent. And I am just so thrilled because, you and I have had an opportunity to speak a couple of times. And every time we talk, I say, man, I wish I could hit record so that everyone else can hear what you and I are talking about, what you are saying. And so my dream has come true. We get to have this conversation together, but truly, for everyone who is listening in, this conversation is for you. Reverend is here for all of you. And so, Reverend, with that, I wondered, would you mind talking to all of us a little bit about, who you are? You have this, very distinct title of Reverend, what that means, and you have many, many hats, one of which is working within the Poor People's Campaign, but there are several others. So it's a lot under the umbrella of, please do tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'll be happy to. I'll be happy to. I am Reverend Carolyn Foster. I am on staff with a nonprofit social justice organization in Birmingham, Alabama called Greater Birmingham Ministries. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. I serve a small congregation, Episcopal congregation here in Birmingham, St. Mark's Episcopal Church. And I'm proud to be one of the tri-chairs for the Alabama Poor People's Campaign. And so in my lifetime, I like to say that my work and my ministry have just come together like a hand in glove, and that what I do every day, what I feel called to do in my ministry is what I'm able to do also in my work with these nonprofits, with the Poor People's Campaign, and of course, the way I serve on Sunday morning in my church and throughout the week.
That's excellent. And would you mind talking to us a bit about your journey to becoming a reverend and a bit more about that hand in glove? Because I will say, with the reason why Food Recovery Network and in particular Poor People's Campaign, work well together, maybe a hand in glove as well, is because, Poor People's Campaign, there's such a wide diversity of people who, come to support Poor People's Campaign. With Food Recovery Network, we have such a wide, amazing, diverse group of young leaders who come together here, and many of whom, go to schools that are of faith. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that in your ministry and that hand in glove that you mentioned.
I'd love to. It's
Mhm.
interesting that you frame it that way. I am part of my responsibilities with Greater Birmingham Ministries is producing our quarterly newsletter, which is called, what title is The Work of a Multitude,
Oh, I love
a
it.
mixed multitude, because
Yes.
that diversity of people that come together with a common goal is what we are all about, what the Poor People's Campaign is all about, what food recovery is all about, because we come together regardless of your social economic status, of your race, of your walk in life, to focus on food recovery, because food and homelessness, being sheltered, having food to sustain you is really a very human and basic need and a human right. And it's something that we all need to come together on, because it is very basic, but it's a right, and it's something that we all should care about, and not take for granted, because life can turn in many, many ways, and you just never know when you might be in a need for food.
Absolutely agree with that. And, throughout this week, we've been talking a bit about, how sometimes in our lives, I mean, we all experience hardships at some point in our lives. That is just what it means to be human,
Yeah.
and how we are able to um, navigate through those difficult times. And, I used to work at a nonprofit called Lift, and we would call these, shaky ground moments.
Mhm.
We all experience, and they can come in multitudes, and do we have the networks, do we have the resources to help support us through these shaky ground moments? Sometimes you need your best friend to talk to, sometimes you need dollars in your pocket to pay for that flat tire and get new tires,
That's right.
to pay for your housing or whatever it might be. And a job loss or illness really can make that into a shaky ground situation for any of us.
Absolutely. I think the last 2 years with COVID has just shown us how unstable things can be so quickly. Who would
Yes.
have thought that the world was shut down? The whole world, practically the whole
Yes.
world was shut down. I never thought I would. I mean, that was just not even in my brain in my
Right.
lifetime. So you just never ever know, and that's why it's so important not to take anything for granted. And for us, if we are in a position to help another, to do that, because then, as you said, there is a time when we might be on shaky ground.
Exactly. And Reverend, I wondered if, through your work with your ministry, you'd also mentioned, that you are one of the tri-state leaders for your work within Poor People's Campaign. Could you talk to everybody a little bit more about what that means and who are the other two people?
Okay, I'll be happy to. The structure of the state campaign, and the Poor People's Campaign is in 45 states in this country, which is wonderful. Alabama was one of the first states that joined the campaign, of course, because this is a relaunch of Dr. King's movement, and he spent a lot of time in Alabama
Yes.
fighting injustice. And so we were happy to come on board when we launched this new, well, I don't like to call it a new movement. It's just a continuation of Dr. King's vision of 1968, which was interrupted with his assassination. He was in the process of organizing among poor, low-income people and their allies and clergy and faith leaders to come together so that we could, as we have both said, a mixed multitude of people to come together to address these injustices around systemic racism, systemic poverty, the war economy, ecological devastation, and the false moral narrative of Christian nationalism. And so we have been a part of the Poor People's Campaign from the very beginning. The way we are structured is that there is a coordinating committee in each state. And here in Alabama, we have 14 members that are stationed all over the state. And they have formed local leaderships in their areas. And the tri-chairs, instead of 2 chairs, we have 3,
Yes.
consist of a faith leader, a person that is connected to a nonprofit of some sort that can serve as the fiscal sponsor for the local movement, and then one person who is directly impacted by these injustices. So we have 3 tri-chairs. And though I am a clergy, a person of faith and a clergy member, I'm not serving that role in this as a tri-chair. I am connected to Greater Birmingham Ministries, which is serving as the fiscal sponsor for the Alabama Poor People's Campaign.
That was so helpful to hear. I love that approach, that trifecta approach, including, and I'm sure everyone listening in might have picked up on the fact that you said the one of the 3 of this 3 stools, the 3 legs to your stool, is also a person who they themselves is a representative. So maybe somebody who is um, living in the community that is representative of the initiatives that you're working towards. Um,
Exactly.
I think that is so beautiful to hear. I mean, the full try approach is wonderful. So many times with Food Recovery Network, our role is to bring in young people to the conversations as people who are on the ground working to support food recovery, as people who are on the ground working with their partner agencies, many of whom are working so diligently to house our community members who are in unstable housing or without housing. Could you talk a little bit about that? I mean, what that means to, have direct representation in your
Oh,
decision making. It's so beautiful to hear that.
absolutely. The Poor People's Campaign is not a top-down organization. It's a bottom-up. And because we believe that if you lift from the bottom, then everybody rises. So it really is a bottom-up organization. We've got to have people who are directly impacted by these
Yeah.
injustices to be at the table, We need to hear their voices. They need to have leadership positions and roles, because really people who are directly impacted know the solutions.
They
They
do.
are the ones that know the solutions. So we are from the very beginning, because that's what Dr. King's vision was. That's why when he was assassinated in Memphis, he was organizing among sanitation workers. And
Yes.
so that's the model that we have maintained over this 5 years now, I guess, that we've been actively involved with the Poor People's Campaign. So it's not a top down at all. It's a bottom up organization.
I am so appreciative of that. And please continue. It sounds like you
Yeah,
had
I'm
another
just going to
thought.
say, and faith leaders are at the table. Allies are at the table. People directly impacted are at the table. And ally and other organizations, not just individual, but organizations, are all at the table. We've got to come together and with one focus. One of the things Reverend Barber says, and I love, is that we are one band, one sound. And that is our vision, is to march together, to work together, to fight together, to go to jail together. We have done that too
Yes.
in direct action. So that's a model that I love. That's a model that I actually became of age with here in Birmingham, Alabama. I was born and raised here in Birmingham, Alabama,
Wow.
with the Children's March and the water hoses that everybody is familiar with seeing that footage. That happened right here in my hometown.
Yes.
And so children were slipping out of school to participate in these direct actions. And teachers would turn their back and write on the board so that they wouldn't see them. They knew they were
Yes.
leaving, but they were letting them go. And so I came out of that kind of a movement. And so when the Poor People's Campaign was relaunched, it was just a natural for me. I felt called to be actively involved.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, I know so well that history of the children. I mean, we are talking about children,
Children, exactly.
young kids, 8, 7, 9, 10, 11 years old, and the bravery and the leadership. So I want to thank you for that. Being, being sort of that's your flow. That is your human flow, is to be, you are part of that from such a young age. And I always say about why I feel so inspired by all these, young student
Yeah.
leaders. When we need something done, when we need something done that is uncomplicated, sometimes the adults, they complicate things, to the point where things aren't getting accomplished because of all these different reasons not to do X, Y, and Z things. Young kids, they're like, we're just ready to make
They're
this
ready to
happen.
go. That's right. They are ready to go.
And I love this real life happening. I have someone coming through the door. Hello. um, but Reverend, I wanted to, next ask you about, um, within your state, the work that you're doing in Alabama. What are some of the initiatives that you are working on? I mean, because you're talking about some of these issues that are plaguing all of us. And,
Mhm.
you're working from that bottom up structure. This isn't a zero-sum game, as some would lead us to believe. And, through Poor People's Campaign, the campaign is leading us to understand that we all deserve, these shelter, clothing, we deserve education, we deserve food. These are all rights. So could you
Mhm.
talk to us a bit about what some of the things are that you are engaged in Alabama?
Yeah. Well, Greater Birmingham Ministries, matter of fact, we've got 125 bags of groceries prepared to go out on Friday. Um, Before COVID, we had our what we call our food pantry day every Friday. But since COVID, we've gone to once a month drive-through sort of way of distributing food. But we're preparing for that on Friday. People come to us, and I think that's one of the reasons why we are so passionate about what we do, is because when you hear the stories of people who come needing something as basic as food to survive, it can break your heart.
Yes.
And so we worked really hard with our supporters. We are supported by over 20 different interfaith organizations that support us. We do not take any federal or city funds or governmental funds to support the work, because they tend to have a lot of restrictions and a lot of the systemic fights that we get involved in is sometimes against them. And so
Yes.
when things on a level playing field, so we are directly supported by our faith communities and by the grants that we are able to get. So we're preparing for food to distribute food on Friday. I myself worked for 7 years at a local homeless shelter for men here in Birmingham. Uh, Became really close to a lot of what we called our guests at the time. So I know the suffering, and I know how easily circumstances can put people in those circumstances. We are accustomed in this country to blame the poor, to blame the homeless on that is their fault. But it's always, if you listen, it's about a system that is broken.
Yes.
And so we work really hard to try to correct and fix those systems that keep people coming to our doors for food or having to check into a homeless shelter. There's a big fight right now going on in Mobile, Alabama, with Reverend Tiny Allgood, who is the other chair with the Poor People's Campaign, that he and some of the Poor People's Campaign supporters down there every Tuesday are at the city council meeting because there have been a threat. There's a place, location in Mobile where the homeless have been sleeping,
Mm.
and they're trying to shut it down. And there is no place because there's not enough homeless shelters, there's not enough affordable housing. And so there is no place for them to go. And so there's been an ordinance that has been written or, that's been proposed by the city council to shut them down and move them out of the only place where they have gathered together, where they have formed community, where they
Yes.
support one another. And there's a big fight down there with the Mobile area Poor People's Campaign right now. And because they show up every Tuesday to city council, they keep postponing the vote because they know we're there. But
Wow.
they continue to go every week so that they'll know that they are there with the homeless, with them. You've got to see us, hear us. And that's why it's so important to have directly impacted people as a part of this movement, because folk who have been privileged, who go to their nice warm homes and have food in their refrigerators, that's all well and good. But you cannot forget those who do not have just even the basics. And so if you are a person of faith, and even if you're just a person of moral leaning, we have to sometimes remind folk who don't have direct proximity with people who are suffering to hear stories, to see them, to personalize these issues.
That is so incredible. And what a powerful um, set of information that you have provided to us, Reverend. And I mean, some of my responses to what you said, and I know we're running short on our time together. We wanted to keep
Sorry, my
this
light
super
keeps
brief.
flashing off on it.
It was a beautiful thing. We love it. The love, the glow. When I worked at the anti-poverty nonprofit, and a lot of what we do here at Food Recovery Network is exactly that. It is debunking the myths as to why people are food insecure or as to why they have become unhoused or homeless. And a lot of times we have to think about who's driving that myth.
Yes.
Who is in control of that narrative? Because, as you said, you are working directly within that community. You have built authentic relationships with people in your community who are right now, sadly, suffering from homelessness, and you
Yeah.
know their stories.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people, and we've been talking very much about this, since my time here at FRN, that many times people don't understand that people who are unhoused or in unstable housing, or are homeless actually work jobs, work multiple
Exactly.
jobs. And it is not about these, failures of making the right decisions
Right.
with our lives. It is just that at the end of all of our hard work, 50, 60, 70 hours of a work day, or excuse me, a work week, that there just is not enough
Not
resources because
enough,
wages are suppressed.
especially in a state like Alabama, who refuses to raise minimum wage. We in Birmingham worked really hard with our local city council to get minimum wage raised for city employees. They agreed, but it only took a few weeks for a Alabama legislator to write a bill that nullified it,
Oh my
saying that
goodness.
this kind of no state, no city, and no municipality can raise minimum wage without going through Montgomery to having it done in our state capital, which was crazy and offensive. So that's a system again
Yes.
that people work 2 and 3 jobs at a minimum wage. It is not enough, and nobody does that. Nobody does works 3 hours, three jobs because they want to.
Right.
They
Right.
work 3 jobs because they have to,
It's so true.
particularly if they're trying to support a family.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
these systems are in place that need to be dismantled.
They need
Dismantled.
to be dismantled. They absolutely need to be dismantled. And, when we think about the history of labor in the United States and Dr. King's efforts, a lot of what we were, we all know Dr. King was working towards was, jobs with dignity,
That's
jobs that paid fair wages. People deserve to be paid a fair wage. And we are so, um, we are so conditioned in the United States to think about, we pay people as little as possible. What do people deserve? We need to think about
Yes.
what do people deserve to do the work that they are doing. Um, and and so there's a whole lot to unpack with that. But when we think about when we keep people to have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, I used to be in that position. Um, how we are controlling their time,
Mm-hmm.
how we are controlling what they're thinking about. Because when you finally have a little bit of downtime, all you're doing is thinking about where you need to go next or
That's
what
right.
bill isn't getting paid. That we deserve to have rest. We deserve to have time that is easeful so that we can be with our friends and our family, and do what it is ever that we want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so it's so wonderful to hear your engagement, ensuring that the city council sees the people that they are, working to keep at a minimum wage that does not support life. And so we want to thank you for that, Reverend.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On our food distribution day here at Greater Birmingham Ministries on Friday, people are waiting in line at 6 a.m. for groceries. Nobody does that if they didn't need it.
It's
6
so true.
a.m. And this weekend, I was looking at the weather report. It's going to be 25 degrees.
Oh, goodness.
25 degrees. And you see, I got my little vest on there because it's a little
Yes.
chilly here in the South
Yes.
today. And
It's chilly in this one.
I think about people who are living on the street. I can put on my little vest and I got a little heater on in my office.
Right.
But if you don't even have shelter, where do you go to keep from freezing to death? It is just so sad.
It
So
is
sad.
so sad. And, through your ministry, through the Poor People's Campaign efforts, you are not only yourself as an individual, but you're working within coalition to say, we don't think that this is right. Our moral leanings, our faith tells us that this is not right. And you are actively working to support a thriving community. And, it's just for everyone listening in. Again, this dose of, I hope, inspiration within hearing the harsh realities that have been systematically created. That when we come together in coalition, when we come together in community, we really can make those changes and we can hold, our elected officials accountable. So that city council tried to do the right thing. Another legislator came in and counteracted that. Well, we now need to hold that
Uh,
legislate accountable. Um, and we have to keep at this work. We have to keep at this work. Well, Reverend, I know that we said we were going to keep this brief, but before I ask you the last question, which is, anything else that you think, our audience should know, I want to just remind everyone who is listening in that, throughout this whole week of Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, Food Recovery Network, we are trying to, raise funds. We have a goal of raising $1,000 for Food Recovery Network, but I also want everyone to, hear from Reverend, because we know that the Poor People's Campaign, they are in all the states that we are in, with Food Recovery Network, a national movement. So for those of you who are in a place to give financial, and I'm only talking to those of you who feel you are in a place of financial ability, to please consider making a donation to Poor People's Campaign so that they can continue their efforts to help raise that minimum wage, not only in Alabama, but federally. And we work together with Poor People's Campaign to do that, so that they can help to show up to support all of our community members who are experiencing homelessness. So for those of you who are in a position to do so, I definitely encourage you to make a donation to Poor People's Campaign. But Reverend, is there anything else, any parting words, that you think that we should know as we conclude our time together? And thank you again so much for your time.
Oh, well, thank you for this invitation. I just like to encourage everyone to get involved in some way, shape, or form. I mentioned earlier that I have been arrested doing direct
Yes.
action, but that's maybe not some folks' cup of tea.
true.
that
Yes.
I have been involved with fundraising, like you just mentioned, and some people can do that and some people can't. But if you would just call an organization who is involved with homelessness and food insecurity and say, I want to help, I can guarantee you there is something that you can do, even if it's stuffing envelopes or answering the phone. Every little bit helps. That's why it's so important that we all do come together, because we all have different gifts. We don't all need the same gifts. We need to just put our gifts, whatever they are, to bear. So just get involved. It's time for all of us. If we want to make this world a better place, it's time to get off the sidelines and let's get on the field and let's play. So we've
Absolutely.
got to do it. That is what I would like to just encourage everyone to get involved in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. So we've all heard from Reverend, we have the invitation to be involved. And if for those of you listening in, if Poor People's Campaign sounds new for you, we are in deep partnership with Poor People's Campaign. I absolutely encourage you to get to know your state Poor People's Campaign chapter. It's an incredible organization, and there are so many more organizations that could use your help. Encourage your friends and your family. Um, we heard it from Reverend. The invitation is there. Reverend, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate hearing from you. I look forward to our next conversation. And in the meantime, good health to you, and thanks for all that you do.
Thank you, Regina.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.